Everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at British Romantic poetry. For the last couple of centuries or eras that we've been studying, mainly the visual arts have dominated each era, right? That's kind of the way to represent the human experience. We're going to take a look at for Romanticism is that the shift really starts happening where poetry, literature, music, start to come out of the kind of the secondary form of human expression and become more of the primary form. We're going to take a look at how we see that within the literature and music of the. One of the themes that we were taking a look at last time when we were taking a look at visual art is the transformation of ideas between celebrating human reason and to now celebrating human innocence. And we're going to take a look at some of those ideas today. And a visual representation of this that I showed you was Michelangelo's creation of Adam versus William Blake's Elohim creating Adam, which is a different representation of the same moment that demonstrates some of the different values that are happening. So I want you to kind of have this in the back of your mind as we go through this as the Romantic era, what they're celebrating, some of the problems that they see with human reason. Let's take a look at Percy Shelley and his defense of poetry. And he's going to make an argument very similar to what we've seen with Alberti and on painting, where Alberti is making an argument for the importance of painting. Percy Shelley is going to make an argument for that in poetry, right? He says, we are aware that evanescent or fleeting visitations of thought and feeling, sometimes associated with place or person, sometimes regarding our own mind alone, and always arising unforeseen and departing unbidden, but elevating and delightful beyond all expression. So what he's suggesting here is memories, right? Memories come and memories go. All of a sudden we will enter into our grandparents' home, and all of a sudden we're overwhelmed by smells, and those smells will immediately take us back to our childhood. Or sometimes we're walking down the street and we hear a particular sound, and all of a sudden a memory comes back, right? Or we hear a particular song, and all of a sudden we're back at prom or on our first date or something like that. And so what he's suggesting is that memories have this kind of intoxicating, elevating type power to them. He says poets can color all that they combine with the evanescent hues of this ethereal world. And so they can kind of combine all of these colors and textures and feelings. They can pack them all together. That's what makes a poet so great. A word, a trait in the representation of a scene or a passion will touch the enchanted chord and reanimate in those who have ever experienced these emotions, the sleeping, the cold, the buried image of the past. And so he's suggesting that the poet has the ability to recreate those emotions and recreate those feelings, and so that they're able to then bring us that same kind of elevation and same kind of happiness. We're going to see this is kind of the theme that we're going to see with British Romantic poetry, some of the thoughts and feelings that they have. Poetry thus makes immortal all that is best and most beautiful in the world. It arrests the vanishing apparitions which haunt the interlunations of life or the passage of time. And so it's able to just kind of freeze those moments of happiness and then be able to reanimate them, recreate them. And so think about memories as kind of the footprints on a sandy beach somewhere. And in a few moments, either the wind or the waves are going to come in, and then those footprints are going to be gone. But poetry makes those kind of footprints, makes those memories, shall we say, able to then become eternal. And so whereas Alberti is suggesting that immortality is attained through the visual arts, we see Shelley's making the argument that it's really done through poetry. Let's take a look at a couple of poets and some of their major ideas that we see. One of the main things that we're going to see is the celebration of innocence over civilization, or innocence over experience. William Blake, we've taken a look at his Elohim creating Adam. Let's take a look at his poetry and see how we see some similar ideas here. in his poem called The Lamb. And he wrote this in 1789, the same year, by the way, as the French Revolution. And so he's already kind of as a precursor, noticing that something is kind of off, realizing that human reason, that civilization is on the verge of collapsing on itself. He says, "Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream or of the mead. Gave thee clothing of delight, soft as clothing woolly bright. Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee?" Right? So he's kind of talking about this innocent little lamb, this little creature, but also lamb is a symbol, right? It's a symbol of purity. It's a symbol of innocence. And then he kind of continues on in the next stanza. He says, "Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. I a child and thou a lamb, who are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee." And so what Blake is celebrating here is that human innocence, right? That element of purity that we once had, that we lost due to the fall, right? But what makes us innocent, what makes us pure, is that idea of childhood, right? And so he's suggesting, just like Christ is a lamb, Christ is innocent, and Christ made himself like a child. This is what humans need to be. This is the height of human happiness, the height of human civilization, is being able to kind of cast off all of those kind of corruptions of the mind that reason brings, or that the experience that the world kind of tells us to act one way, really tells us how to think and how to behave. But really, what that civilization does is it only corrupts us. It perverts our mind, gets us to think, turn away from God, and to rely on the arm of flesh rather than on our faith. And so making that argument here that innocence is really the pinnacle of human civilization, what we need to aspire to. Taking a look at William Wordsworth and his "The World is Too Much With Us," what we see is a similar idea of that idea, emphasizing innocence. But this is more focusing on how we need to be innocent as a society, right? Rather than civilization, modernization, industrialization, we need to focus more on our pure essence, primitive essence that makes us even better. He says, "The world is too much with us," right? So we're constantly surrounded by, in his day, he wrote this in 1807. The technology back in his day was much different than it was today. But he's suggesting that, that reason, the world, the kind of the clutter, the busyness is too much with us late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. And so we're constantly worried about getting things, more and more things, and spending more and more. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. So we've just kind of sold ourselves away for this kind of corrupt world. The sea that bears her bosom to the moon. The winds that will be howling at all hours are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For thee, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in the creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, right? So I would rather be a pagan, kind of worshiping nature and looking to nature for greater insights, rather than be where we're at in this kind of fallen, corrupt world that we live in. Have sight of Proteus, who is a sea god rising from the sea, or hear the old Triton blow his wreathed horn. And so he would rather have that greater connection with nature, because that's where human civilization, that's when the pinnacle of humanity really was, right? As we become more civilized, quote unquote, as we become more modernized, we lose our innocence, we lose our connection with God, we lose our connection with the natural world. I want to take a look at his Ode to Intimations of Immortality. This is probably one of the poems that's quoted the most during General Conference. And so every so often I'll hear Ode to Intimations, and one of the prophets talking about this particular poem. And so it really does capture some deep, profound insights. He says, there was a time when meadow, grove, and stream. And so this idea, there was a time, there's this past time, right? So again, similar to Percy Shelley, it's about memories, right? There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it has been of yore. Turn wherever I may, by night or day, things which I have seen, I now can see no more. And so what he's suggesting is that there was a time when everything seemed celestial, everything seemed divine, everything seemed magical and wonderful. And there is something that has been lost within that, right? So we see a similar idea to William Blake, right? The idea that there was a time when we were innocent and we lost that innocence. Let's take a look at happiness. He says, now while the birds thus sing a joyous song, and while the young lambs bound to the tabor sound, to me alone came a thought of grief. A timely utterance gave that thought relief. And again, I am strong. And so here he is kind of sitting kind of out in the wilderness, kind of just sad because something is gone. He knows that something has been passed. And while everything else, the young lambs, kind of the innocents are out there kind of enjoying life, he has this thought of grief. But as he's sitting there kind of forlorn or melancholy, he hears this timely utterance that gives that thought relief, right? So he hears something. I want you to think about, what does he hear? He says, and all the earth is gay, the land and sea give themselves up to jollity, and with the heart of May doth every beast keep holiday. Thou child of joy, shout round me, let me hear thy shouts, thou happy shepherd boy. And so what does he hear? He hears a little shepherd boy. He hears a little song. He hears a song of a little kid out there having happiness. And so within that, I want you to think about that as you kind of are, entering into this adulthood. There's these, the complexities and hardships that sometimes come with that. But I want you to imagine if you're walking by an elementary school one day and you just happen to be there during recess, what do you hear, right? Off in the distance, you hear children playing. And what do you think about, right? What kind of emotions do you feel, right? All of a sudden, you're brought back to those same kind of feelings and happiness of childhood, right? So he's remembering as he hears and sees this shepherd boy. That brings him happiness, even though life is filled with complexity and sometimes corruption. He says, our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life star, has elsewhere its setting. And so it says, when we come to this earth, we come from heaven. And something happens, something changes within us, right? And cometh from afar, not an entire forgetfulness and not an utter nakedness. This is a little bit different from John Locke's tabula rasa, or a blank slate. He says that we have something with us. We have a purity, we have an innocence. But trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy, in our young childhood, right? But then, as we grow older, we lose that innocence. Behold the child among his newborn blisses, fretted by sallies of his mother's kisses. With light upon him from his father's eyes, see at his feet some little plan or chart, right? So as children grow, they then want to, make their parents happy. So then their parents say, this is what I want you to do. This is who I want you to become. Maybe you've had similar conversations with this recently with your parents as you've focused on what your major is. Some fragment from his dream of human life shaped by himself with this newly learned art. And so he's learning something from adults. And as he learns this, he loses his innocence. To dialogues of business, love, or strife, and with new joy and pride, the little actor, right, no longer kind of this innocent being, but now he's an actor, right? He learns this new art, cons another part, filling from time to time his humorous stage. But again, so that's kind of where we start to lose our innocence. We start to gain this corruption from adulthood. Adults kind of teach us how to kind of put on a mask and to act differently and to lose our innocence, so to speak. But we still can find that. I want you to think about, where can we find that happiness? He says, we in thought will join your throng, ye that pipe and ye that play, ye that through the hearts a day feel the gladness of the May. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight? Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass or glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind. And so the thing that provides him happiness are the memories, right? These memories, these joyous memories of what once was. And so that's how we can kind of reconnect with that innocence, even though as part of necessity, we lose that innocence as we gain experience and adulthood. I wanted to leave off with another poem by a British romantic, John Keats, and his Ode to a Nightingale. And I want you to think about how we see similar ideas embedded within this. And there's a couple other poems that I wanted you to read. One was entitled Prometheus. The other one is Kubla Khan by Coleridge. I want you to think about how we see similar ideas. And so I'm just giving you some themes to think about that you can then apply to other British romantic poets. And allegedly, John Keats was, kind of out one evening on his back porch, and he heard this nightingale that's out there singing at night, and he goes and writes the poem, this poem, and then by the time he's finished, the bird has flown off as he goes in and writes this poem, and by the time he finishes it, the bird had returned. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of according to legend. He says, "My heart aches," and I think that's a kind of a British romanticist kind of melancholy sadness about life. "My heart aches, and a drowsiness numbs the pains. My senses as though hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passes, and Lethe wards had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thy happiness." And so he hears this kind of melodic sound of this nightingale, and all of a sudden his heart is aching. He feels as though he's kind of lost. He's lost his balance. He's not really sure. And the question is, well, why? Why is he so upset by this? And it's not because he was the bird's too happy, but it's being too happy. Right, and so this causes him confusion. What do you have to be so happy about? Right? Have you ever had people that were kind of grumpy when they were around happy people? That's kind of Keats in this case. "That thou light-winged dryad of the trees," right, referring to the bird here, that this kind of god or this nymph of the trees sings of summer in full-throated ease. And so this bird is just singing happily, completely unaware. "Oh, for a draught of vintage, a draught of wine, that have been cooled in the long age of the deep-delved earth, tasting of flora or flowers of the country green, that I might drink and leave this world unseen, and with thee fly into the forest, or fade into the forest dim." And so he's saying, I wish I could just kind of leave this world behind. And so at first he's thinking, well, maybe, some wine would do that. But then he's going to start to think, well, maybe there's another way. He says, "Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known." All right. And so again, what makes adulthood, what makes life so miserable? The weariness, the fever, the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale, spectre thin, and dies. And so he's suggesting here what makes people unhappy is the acknowledgement or the realization of their mortality, right? And so he's thinking, how can we escape that? How can we escape that thought in the back of our minds of one day, that this is a temporary existence and one day we're not going to be here? He says, "Away, away, I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus, who's the god of wine, or his pards, but on the viewless wings of poesy, right? And so poetry is going to take him there, right? So again, similar to Shelley, it's poetry that's being able to uplift and to capture these high states of emotion. He says, "Thou was not born for death, immortal bird, nor hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown." And so what he suggests here is not necessarily that one specific bird was around for ancient, it's not as though it's lived for thousands of years, but the song of the bird, right? So here we see Keats trying to find immortality. How do we find immortality? How do we find happiness? Well, one way that he suggests is through the wine, to find a way to escape. But he suggests that the better way to do this is through poetry. Poetry captures the highest, most elevating thoughts that can then transcend generations. And so he writes this poem down, this ode to a nightingale, to find a way to connect with the eternal aspects of nature. And so we see similar ideas emerging in British Romantic poetry, this idea of looking to nature, seeing nature and its innocence and its purity as a way for us to kind of learn and be uplifted by, focusing more on human innocence as a kind of a driving force that we see embedded within all of British Romantic, or elements of most British Romantic poets.